On December 18, 2025, after spending more than 38 years on death row, Frank Athen Walls, one of Florida's most notorious serial killers, was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. Convicted of at least 4 murders committed between 1985 and 1987, Walls' case became one of the longest-running death row cases in the state's history. In this video, we revisit the events of that final day, explore what his last meal was, and examine the final words he spoke before the lethal injection ended his life. Frank Athen Walls was born on October 12, 1967, in Ocean City, Florida. Very little is publicly known about his early life, but even from a young age, he exhibited signs of a deeply disturbed mind. Before he turned 20, Walls had already established a troubling pattern of criminal behavior that included break-ins, voyeurism, spying on young women, and acts of animal abuse. At the time his killing spree began, Walls worked as a dishwasher at a restaurant called Quincy's. He earned very little money and lived in a trailer with roommates who sensed something deeply unsettling about him. One of them, Thomas "Animal" Farnham, later admitted that living with Walls made him profoundly uncomfortable. Farnham recalled that Walls frequently spoke about dark and depraved topics, rape, murder, and methods of killing people without leaving evidence. Walls' first known murder occurred on March 26, 1985, on Okaloosa Island. It was a Tuesday. At just 17 years old, Walls was performing court-ordered community service on the beach when he noticed Tommy Lou Whitten, a 19-year-old junior college student, lying on the sand and sunbathing. She was relaxed, unaware that someone nearby was watching her with violent intent. Walls approached her holding a knife. He said nothing. There was no argument, no warning. Without provocation, he slit her throat in a single, swift motion. As Tommy Lou bled to death on the sand, where moments earlier everything had seemed calm, Walls simply walked away. He stole her car and disappeared. Her body was discovered later that afternoon by a passerby walking along the shoreline. Her car was found the next day, abandoned behind a building, discarded without a second thought. 18 months later, Walls killed again. On September 16, 1986, in Wright, Florida, the violence escalated significantly. His victim was 24-year-old Cynthia Sue Condra. Unlike the lone fatal wound inflicted on his first victim, Walls attacked Cynthia Sue with extreme brutality, stabbing her 21 times. The ferocity of the attack suggested not only an intent to kill, but a desire to dominate, humiliate, and annihilate. He left her body on the side of the road, fully exposed, making no effort to hide what he had done, an act that reflected chilling arrogance and a belief that he was untouchable. Walls' third confirmed murder occurred in the early morning hours of May 20, 1987, near Fort Walton Beach. He broke into a mobile home occupied by Audrey Gaji, a 47-year-old factory worker at Caltech. She had no connection to Walls and was targeted simply because she was alone and vulnerable. Walls raped her and then fled the scene. But as he escaped into the night, his thinking shifted. The fact that he had left a living witness began to trouble him. In his warped logic, he decided that anyone who could identify him had to die. Walls returned to the mobile home, found Audrey again, and this time stabbed her to death without hesitation. He stole a fan and a radio, items of little value, and vanished once more. Audrey Gaji's naked body was discovered the following morning when a concerned co-worker went to check on her. What Walls didn't realize was that he had left behind a crucial piece of evidence, a fingerprint on the fan. Decades later, advances in forensic technology would turn that forgotten object into the key that definitively linked him to the crime. On July 22, 1987, at approximately 1:30 a.m., Walls broke into a mobile home at Greenwood Mobile Home Park. Inside were Edward Alger, a 22-year-old airman stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Ann Louise Peterson. This was not a burglary that spiraled out of control. It was a calculated act by a man who wanted to see fear firsthand, who wanted to control the moment and decide who lived and who died. Walls did not try to be silent. Instead, he deliberately knocked over a fan to make noise and wake the couple. He wanted them to know someone was there. He wanted to see their reaction. He wanted to watch terror set in. When Edward and Ann went to see what had caused the noise, they came face to face with Walls. He was armed with a .22 caliber handgun and a knife. In a chilling display of control, Walls forced Ann to bind her own boyfriend's hands and ankles before restraining her as well. The psychological terror of that moment is almost impossible to comprehend. being compelled to tie up the person you love while knowing something terrible is about to happen. After gagging both of them, Walls dragged and into the living room, leaving Edward bound and alone in the darkness. But Edward Alger refused to give up. Through sheer determination, he managed to loosen his restraints. He lunged at Walls in a desperate attempt to save both himself and Anne. Walls overpowered him. With Edward pinned to the floor, Walls slashed his throat. Edward didn't die immediately. Still conscious and fighting for his life, he bit Walls' hand with enough force to make him drop the knife. It was a final act of resistance, a last refusal to submit. Walls showed no hesitation. He pulled out his gun and shot Edward 3 times in the head at point-blank range. The fight was over. Edward Alger was dead. Walls then returned to Anne. He removed her gag and sexually assaulted her as she begged him to stop. At one point, he raised the gun and shot her in the head. The bullet did not kill her. She was still alive, still suffering. Walls then placed a pillow over her face so he wouldn't have to watch, and fired again, this time killing her. He took $200, a worn leather wallet, and another fan, petty items taken after acts of unimaginable violence. Walls was arrested less than 24 hours after Edward and Anne's bodies were discovered. His roommate, John Early, noticed Walls' disturbing behavior and the stolen items inside their trailer and alerted police. A search of the residence revealed a disturbing collection: knives, ice picks, .22 caliber firearms, pornography, thumbtacks, and one especially incriminating item, blood-stained jeans. Evidence of brutality hiding in plain sight. In July 1988, a jury of 12 was selected, and prosecutors sought the death penalty. The trial was brief. After just 6 days, Walls was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On August 25, 1988, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Ann Peterson and to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, for the murder of Edward Alger. That conviction was overturned in 1989, leading to a retrial in 1992. Once again, Walls was sentenced to death under the same penalties. While he remained on death row, investigators continued working to link him to other unsolved crimes. In 1994, DNA evidence conclusively tied him to the murder of Audrey Gaggi through a fingerprint left on a fan. Faced with undeniable proof and the certainty of another death sentence, Walls entered a no-contest plea to Gaggi's murder and accepted responsibility for the killings of Tommy Lou Whitten and Cynthia Condra, avoiding additional trials. For 38 years, Frank Athen Walls remained on death row at Union Correctional Institution. He filed numerous appeals, all of which were denied. He later claimed intellectual disability, arguing that an IQ score of 72 made him ineligible for execution under Atkins v. Virginia. However, earlier records showed IQ scores near 100. The court concluded that Walls was feigning impairment in an attempt to avoid execution. On December 18, 2025, at the age of 58, after nearly 4 decades in the prison system, Frank Athen Walls was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison in Stark. He woke at 5:10 a.m. and remained compliant throughout the day, receiving a visit and accepting spiritual counsel. His final meal included chicken, steak, vegetables, a baked potato, cheesecake, and juice. At 6 p.m., Walls was escorted to the gurney and the lethal injection was administered. During the execution, he moved and appeared to struggle. It took approximately 15 minutes for him to die, longer than usual, and the process showed visible signs of distress. His death marked Florida's 19th execution of 2025, the highest number carried out by the state in a single year. With his execution, a sentence that had lingered for nearly 38 years was finally carried out.